Bob Dylan, and you heard this Mortal Coil, and that was Songs of the Siren. On Radio 2, it's 9 o'clock. Right, there you go, that's the one, Bachelor Kisses. Spring Hill Fair is the third LP from the Go-Betweens, and Grant McLennan, all the way from Australia. You're very welcome to the programme. Tell us, how did you like the gig today at lunchtime in Trinity College?
I thought it was fantastic. It's difficult, but I can't talk. As a band, we were very happy about it, but personally speaking, I've looked forward to being in Dublin for so many years. Ever since I could start to read, I think I had some connection to wanting to come here, and I just feel very happy to be here.
And why? What kind of things did you read?
Well, when I was 2 years old,
you read Ulysses?
Yeah, my mother put Ulysses in front of me. No, I can't honestly say that, but when I got cognizant as to what I liked in books, I started reading a lot of Irish literature. And I did actually go to university at some stage. I don't think I've ever admitted that, but I did go. And I made a special study of early 20th century Irish literature. And, of course, Dublin was quite central to most of that. So as far as the academic side of me goes, I'm interested in coming to see the streets, the names. But more importantly, I think the spiritual side of me, there is a connection between Australians and Irish in that we were abused, I think, by the English quite a fair bit, and the Irish formed, in some way, the early backbone of Australian culture. And I was talking to some journalist from a magazine called Hot Press this evening. And
Wouldn't be George Byrne by any chance?
Oh, it might be George Byrne. He had a cigar. Yeah, so it was, He was about 80 years old.
Oh, yeah.
Wonderful guy.
No, well,
wonderful guy.
Yeah.
He did a vaudeville act in the 20s in America. And he told me a lot of stories about that. But when he started to get too indulgent about himself, I turned it back to myself. And we discussed a lot of good things.
I see. Over a cup of tea.
Over a cup of tea. We actually were in a coffee lounge called Conway's, and it was one of the nicest coffee lounges I've ever been into.
Yeah, right. That's the sort of place you used to play in Australia when you started off in 77. So the coffee bars.
Oh, heaven forbid. I mean, when we first started in Australia, it was this was at the end of 77, and in those days, a term "new wave" was a very, very angry word. It really did mean people that go out and put safety pins in babies' earlobes and things like that. But also the state that we came from is a very fundamental Christian state. And
which is Queensland.
Queensland, yes. And the capital city was Brisbane. And the government there abuses its power just terribly, and used to use the police and strike forces to break up those early gigs. And whilst Robert and I, when we first started, we were never the Go-Betweens as we are now. We were a two-piece at that stage. Whilst we were we were accused of being many things. Wimps was one. An insulting term of homosexual was another term that we were referred to as in those days. We, in some way, connected with the more angry English Detroit scene that Brisbane bands were doing at that stage, and we were accepted. But as far as the government goes and the forces that controlled the town, they used to break up gigs all the time.
Mm.
And it was a strange. They were very strange days. They were very vital days. It was, I think, the best Brisbane's ever been as far as music goes. But apart from, say, a nucleus of 200 to 300 people, no one else was interested. And that attitude towards this new music was manifested in other cities in Australia, like Sydney and Melbourne. They were bigger cities, so the nucleus was bigger. But still, no one was interested. Record companies just wanted to go, oh, I don't believe that people could do music like that. And I'm talking about bands like The Birthday Party, talking about bands like Laughing Clowns, the good old days of Australian new wave music. But it's weird because things have turned around. In Australia now, all the old bands which we used to hate now in some way have, like the leather ties, the white shirts, the snappy haircuts, and all these guys are about 36 to 45 and are trying to desperately attach themselves like some pathetic little barnacle to this new music. It's very sad to see, but the record industry in Australia at least has in some way paying attention to new bands.
Did you see yourself then as definite outsiders, the two of you, in '77?
Yes, because I have to say that in some way we were middle class. In some way, myself more than Robert. I don't want to categorise him as that. But the music we were interested in was, I loved Patti Smith. And I'm just a complete fan of her music. And I know she's liable to excess, but I absolutely accept it in her. And I can forgive her for, the second side of Radio Ethiopia. But we were also listening to Jonathan Richman. We were listening to the Talking Heads' first album, listening to Dylan's '66 album, listening to the Velvet Underground. All the other bands at that stage were listening to The Clash, were listening to the Stooges' Funhouse. And whilst we liked those records, we could never repeat in our songs that sound or had any inclination to do it. So we were outsiders within that scene, but on a wider scale we were even further outside things.
Well, when you say influenced by, say, anything from Detroit to London, surely it sounds to me more like New York.
Well, we were definitely. I'm very worried about influences and stuff because it's such a vague area. Because some bands can take a sound and try and mimic it, and that's an influence. Whereas what I was interested in more was just the feeling of the records, the ambience. And what I got from all those records, even something as electric as Richard Hell's Blank Generation, was the sense of a small room, a wooden room, people with guitars, people with drums, people with lyrics which you hadn't heard before, done in a way that you weren't familiar with. And that interested me because I didn't feel completely comfortable within the music scene that we're in. I didn't feel comfortable within the Australian culture as a larger extension. And also I grew up in the country, so I felt quite left out of the urban thing there as well. But no, I would say Robert felt that as well, a New York feel. But there was also the Broadway thing as well. I mean, I've always loved Liza Minnelli. I've always loved Stephen Sondheim, things like that. So if you can imagine a marriage of all those things, that's what we were like then. Didn't sound like it, but that's what we were like.
Well, what about before you met Robert then? What about that growing up in Queensland? I mean, is it the sort of the Texas, say, of Australia?
Well, it's as big as Texas, It's a giant state, and it's a very... this is almost an autobiography, isn't it, Dave? It's a strange state. Yes. It was like most places in Australia. There is the city centre, and then there is everything else. And as far as Queensland goes, because it's so big, there's Brisbane, and then there's all these little coastal towns up the coast of Queensland. And there's a thing called the Barrier Reef, which I spent half my life near. Palm trees, sands. It was very like the Bermudas, all that type of thing.
So even with a rural background, you were a beach bum?
Well, I spent half my... I don't think you can say the word bum on radio. You certainly can't in Australia.
Too late now.
Yeah. I think the word in Australia is mub. We say it backwards.
Yeah.
But, no, it's strange. I spent half my life in a cattle station, half my life surrounded by sugar cane. That could be a cue for a song, but
cattle and
fortunately,
I don't have it
on the turntable. And why isn't it here? And I used to ride horses, cut cane, walk for 200 miles, go on rodeos, things like that. So I did the whole exotic Australian upbringing, everything which people here might expect. But as far as music goes, all I listened to from, I think, 1966 was the Monkees. I listened to the Monkees day in, day out for 4 years until I went away to boarding school.
Were you one of these people who thought that the Monkees really were better than the Beatles, which some people try to claim?
Well, no.
At the time?
As far as I was concerned at that time, what I knew, I loved the Monkees. I thought Davy Jones was the most beautiful creature in the world. I knew nothing about, Tin Pan Alley, which wrote all their songs, and for the first two albums, all those great people that played on the albums, like Glenn Campbell. I mean, I didn't know about that. I didn't care. I thought Mickey was very funny. I thought Mike Nesmith wore a great hat. I thought Peter Tork was a complete fool, but Davy Jones was the most beautiful thing. And I just loved, 4 happy guys living in a house. God, I was 7 years old. I just thought it was wonderful.
Well, I think this one here is wonderful. This is the song that they're just talking about, because I have now lined it up, and if I keep talking, it'll start. There it is. In fact, this start here, which you'll hear, well, you can't hear it properly now.
Read the cue.
Yeah, this is not the same start you gave it today when you played it live, but there you are. Okay, here it is. This is Kathleen Kane from the Before Hollywood album. There it is, that's The Wrong Road, and that's from the current LP, Liberty Bell and the Black Diamond Express. Before that you heard one from the second album, Before Hollywood, and that was Kathleen Kane. Grant McLennan from the Go-Betweens here with us still. So let's stay with Australia for a while before we play this next choice of yours here, Grant, which isn't a Go-Between song. Yeah, that thing I was saying about Australia, I mean, like, what kind of a family life did you have? And like, in that I would suggest possibly that some of your writing has come from an awareness, so this is getting very long, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I'll answer the question you didn't ask.
That's exactly
okay. Which is very difficult because I don't know what to answer. But I came from a single-parent family. For a start, my father died when I was very young, and our family was ruled by very strong women, feminine figures, and so most of my references to the world, the way I looked at things, were determined by the way my aunts, my grandmother, my mother saw things. I really appreciate that. I don't regret, whilst of course I wish that my father was still alive. I don't think too much about it because it happened such a long time ago. But coming from a rural family, it was very strange because in Australia there are graziers, people who work with cattle and sheep, and there are farmers who work with corn or sugarcane, and they were most of the people I experienced in my upbringing. So I'm not saying that all farmers, all graziers have a narrow view of the world, but to survive they have to, in some way, to close off the world, because distances in Australia are so big. The world closes in around a community, around a farming community. I mean, it's something which I'm sure people in Ireland know about, because it's quite a rural country as well. So as far as hearing music, I didn't hear things like the Rolling Stones, things like the Beatles, all that music from the 60s, because my mother wasn't interested in the slightest. She used to listen to the black and white minstrels. And I had to find music not through the radio because she couldn't listen. We didn't have a radio, but we had. When we went into town, I would buy records, and I saw the Monkees on television, loved them, and that's why I bought their records. I didn't realise that there was anything else in the pop world apart from the Monkees until I was about 12 years old, when I went away to boarding school, and I was laughed at a great deal at boarding school by people who were into Led Zeppelin and all those bands, which I thought, Led Zeppelin, what does that mean? And a band, the Monkees, they're the band, and they thought Monkees, kids stuff, 12, 13-year-old people telling me that. And it wasn't until I discovered David Bowie. I heard Starman in 1972, and it murdered me. It just knocked me sideways. And I'm just talking to other people in bands like Roddy Frame from Aztec Camera, when that was the first David Bowie song he heard, and it just killed him. Martin Bramar from a band called the Blue Orchids. He just, I remember talking to him, and that song killed him. Robert, who I formed the Go-Betweens with, that was a song which was really special to him. And so I went from the Monkees, this innocent California experience of sun, surf, cars, girls who were the daughter of the Yugoslavian ambassador and stuff like that, ridiculous, stories, to David Bowie, who no one was sure whether they were man or woman. And you have to understand that a boarding school situation, which was a very macho thing in Australia, it was still run on the lines of English public schools, all the fag system and all that sort of stuff. I had posters of David Bowie in makeup on my wall, and that great shot of Bowie going down on Mick Ronson's guitar, and he said, "I quit," just that the big "I quit" thing. And I had that up, and that was just incredible. People were insulting me for all my years at boarding school as a result of that.
Well, what about that then? You touched on that, the sort of Australian macho image thing. I mean, do you think that your upbringing, like from the very word go, you were always anti that? And like, can I say that that's therefore reflected in the sort of, like, if the Go-Betweens and Grant McLennan writes love songs, they're totally different to the normal, say, pop or rock love song or whatever. And like, it's all related along the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you said that, but beyond not wanting to put like reinforce those views, I also don't want to work with cliche. And we as a band have tried so hard, probably to our disadvantage, to not work with cliche. But as far as...
You mean to a commercial disadvantage?
Well, yeah, definitely to a commercial disadvantage, because I do think we work with melody, chorus, try and attempt a singing in key, try and attempt in-tune guitars and things like that. So there is this, we've often been called perverse. I mean, I suppose in some way we are. You know, we did the whistle test the other day, and just looking at us within context of all those other bands, we just came across as the most, outrageously anti-show business entity, which shocks me, because we're very interested in showbiz at the moment. But within Australia, we were always viewed, as I was saying earlier before, as somewhat different in as far as Robert and I went. But it really wasn't until Lindy joined the band and hearing her point of view on a lot of things, which I came to realise that I did, and Robert as well, reinforce a lot of male stereotypes about women. And so that's one thing I'm very grateful about, is having Lindy in the band, and also our new member Amanda on violin and keyboards. It's just great having women in the band, because most rock and roll bands just get into this horrible little closed world, and if it's a little closed world of men, it gets ridiculous, it gets crazy, even
Does that bring us back to Bachelor Kisses?
Yes, it does. I mean, Bachelor Kisses, whilst there's no way that I would ever say that I was writing it from a perfect male point of view, the aware, sensitive, feminist male. I mean, I would never claim to that, because I don't believe a male can claim that. But just what I saw in myself and other people that I knew, men with girlfriends or wives, I saw a lot of bad attitude. And I don't think Bachelor Kisses by any means is a great statement, and I certainly don't want it to be. It was just my viewpoint on things, and it's just the Puritan within me. I think that line, "faithful's not a bad word," is all I wanted to say in that song.
Mm. Well, what about getting it more down to what you mentioned there, the commercial thing? I mean, the Go-Betweens, 4 albums, 7 different record labels. Talk about a turbulent career. I mean, like, was it your own fault, do you think, in any ways?
Yes, I do. I think in some way it was our fault. But I'm certainly not going to talk about that, I'm not going to talk about where we've gone wrong. I'm just going to talk about people in record labels that have gone wrong and can't market us and all that sort of stuff. When it all comes down to it, I simply don't care. All I hope in the morning of the next day, when I wake up, if I can look at myself in the mirror and say I didn't embarrass myself last night, or I didn't prostitute myself, that's all I want to be able to say.
Well, what about if I think, like, the first LP, Send Me a Lullaby, I'm not crazy about that album, and 8 Pictures would be the track I'd like best on that, and then, like, it was a quantum leap to the second one, Before Hollywood, but Spring Hill Fair was just perfect, and yet Seymour Stein, or whatever his name is, the guy from Sire Records, felt that he couldn't market the album, and therefore it wasn't released in the States.
Yeah, but that was a crazy situation. I mean, you had Sire Records, and it's an American company. They had signed Roddy, they'd signed the Bunnymen for America, they'd signed the Smiths for America, but all those other bands came out in WEA in England. We came out in Sire. There was no one within the Warner Brothers enterprise to market us. Whether we gave them the record that they wanted, I really don't care. But as far as singles go, Park Company, Bachelor Kisses, I think are 2 classics, and any record company worth its salt would have been able to do something with that. But, I mean, I've always said there's no use crying over spilt hits, And there's nothing sadder than someone in a band moaning about what they deserve and what they should have had. I think it's pathetic. I've got no respect for people who talk like that. I think you should get on with making good records, get on with making friends, get on with having a life which is in some way separate to the band. Because there's so many people I know, friends, who are just so caught up in what they're doing musically that they shut off so many other avenues, and that's something I'm not interested in, and that's something that no one else in the band is interested in either.
So it never really comes to the point then that being a critic's favourite and not being a commercially great success is something that, like, the last thing you need is another critic who likes you. It's not.
Oh no, of course. I mean, that's something we talk about. Like adding up the good reviews, and 99 good reviews, 1 bad review. I mean, I'm sick of it. No, I do want some bad reviews, and I just thank God that there is a magazine called New Musical Express and a few writers there that don't like us, because it does give another opinion on what we're doing. Whether I think it's a well-written opinion, that's another thing. But I'm just... There's honestly no point in worrying about what people think. And if you do worry about what people think, you're never going to do anything. You might be the most successful band in the world, but you're never going to do anything.
Well, you said earlier there that you're not against showbiz, so do you want to be a rock and roll star?
I think I am a rock and roll star. I think I'm a very interesting rock and roll star. I'm the rock and roll star that, well, for example, you could take me home and I would be very well behaved. I would probably steal the silver from the cabinet, but...
You wouldn't throw my telly out the window?
No, I certainly would not throw the television out the window, because I love television. No, I do think I'm a rock and roll star, but in a different definition of the word. That's for sure. The fact that people ask for your autograph means that you're a rock and roll star.
Well, what about then the go-betweens then as rock and roll stars?
What about them?
Or as character actors in the same way? For instance, for instance, you'd have sort of your Robert Redfords or whatever right up there at the very top, and then you have your, I don't know, Ned Beatty, say, or whatever is the one, right? Okay, like who's in?
Are you comparing me to Ned Beatty? How dare you?
You're a little less fat, Grant.
Oh, a little less fat.
And a lot younger.
Do you want me to abuse you on the radio? I don't believe this. People write in right now. I don't look anything like now. Oh.
But surely you get my point. Do you know what I mean? Like, for instance, like a lot of, like, you can see a lot.
I've never been put over a log in a film. Okay.
Okay. Deliverance. All right. Okay. No.
I don't believe this.
Surely you get the point I'm making, though. I mean, like that. Like, for instance, that you're not out there in front as the top ones, but therefore, if you're the second ones, they're the ones who really, in the end, get the most praise.
Maybe if you'd sent someone like Harry Dean Stanton. If you'd said someone like Lee Marvin, great character actors, great personalities.
Robert would fit the Harry Dean Stanton a bit better.
Yeah, well, I mightn't have erupted so much, but I mean.
Well, you know what I mean.
Character actor. Honestly, words fail me. Words fail me. I would much rather be compared to Carol Lynley or some B-grade television actress than Ned Beatty. I mean, I think he's done great work. But I'm a lot better looking than Ned Beatty.
Okay, Grant, let's get on to something else entirely, which isn't even the go-betweens. It's not Australian, it's not Ned Beatty. This is something...
It's filmic, though, isn't it?
It's filmic. Oh, yes, it is. That's right. That's quite true. So it is. I'll tell you why. Now, the thing about it is that I met you this afternoon. I said, look, if you have a few albums you wouldn't mind me trying to get together, then do. You gave me a list of about 5 or 6, and they're all there in front of you, and we played some of them earlier on. Now, the thing is that this one here is just one I have down the floor here. Is a lot of people know, I just sort of throw the records down the floor and pick them up, and I never know what I'm playing from one minute to the next.
It's a very neat pile, though.
Thanks very much, Grant. Now, but the thing about it is that this album that I have here is one that I probably brought down every second night of the week for the last 6 years, because it's definitely in my top 3 LPs of all time.
And what are the other 2?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I suppose the White Album. I mean, it's got to be a Beatles. So the White Album.
That's just so fashionable in London at the moment. How dare you? I mean,
that's the moment.
No, everyone.
I could have told you that 10 years ago.
Lawrence from Felt is talking about. Ben and Tracy are talking about it for Everything But the Girl.
Turn them off.
Oh my God.
Okay, well, look, any Beatles.
You've been over there, haven't you? Recently?
No, I haven't been there for years. Revolver, right?
Revolver's a good record. It's a record I much prefer to Rubber Soul.
But not Hey Hey with the Monkeys.
Well, I'm somewhat older now. I'm about the age of Ned Beatty, and so I don't know much about rock and roll music anymore.
Anyway, wait a minute. Look, we haven't told anybody what this album is.
It's a song.
I'm sure you can all see this at home here. I'm holding up the cover of the LP. A fascinating cover.
It's a gatefold sleeve which went out quite a few years ago, but it's a very fashionable device, a way of presenting a record. It's by a band called Roxy Music, and it's one of my favourite songs off...
But what about the album itself, the first Roxy Music album?
Oh, I like it. I love Sea Breezes. I really like Sea Breezes.
Ever made.
Yeah, and I love this song 2HB, and actually I think, if memory serves me well, to borrow a phrase
from a song we just played,
another songwriter, was didn't Brian Ferry do another version of it on Let's Stick Together or something like that? 2HB, I think so.
Oh,
maybe if I'm wrong, people can ring up and abuse me.
Okay,
but let's play it anyway.
Well, I mean, no, you did say earlier on that you wanted me to tell you what.
Okay.
One of the things about this LP that I think is so good is Brian Ferry's vocals.
He's a great vocalist. He's very mannered.
Certainly in the last 10 years.
Most people's reaction to Brian Ferry is quite strange. Most people think he's either a lounge lizard or he's brilliant. Brian Ferry, to me, is someone who... I do think he's underrated. I think he has presented himself consistently well. He's presented himself consistently of his own personality. Whilst in the last few years, I think his addiction to trying to make beautiful records, which is a very, very dangerous thing to want to do, to make beautiful records. I don't think you've got any control over beauty. And but Ferry wants to do that. I don't think he's done anything really as good as Roxy Music myself, or even The Sign of the Times off the Bride Strip Bear, which we might play later.
We have that,
if I'm allowed.
Too, indeed, yeah. Okay, we're going to play this one then. This is for Celluloid Heroes Everywhere. Here's Looking at You, Kid. Humphrey Bogart, 2HB from Roxy Music.
Once I had a sweet love, always follow me around.
Now, within that selection there, one song we didn't play was Burma Shea from Tom Waits, but that was, of course, Venus from television, from the Marky Moon album. What did we play? Oh yeah, of course, Ricky Lee Jones. Ricky Lee Jones.
Let's not get into that. I liked it. You didn't particularly.
No, it's not that I don't. I just don't know it very well. And what did we play before that? What was the first one?
What did we play before? We played 2HB.
Roxy Music, 2HB, of course, yeah. So listen, Grant, there's not an awful lot of time left, so what will we talk about now?
Well, we could talk about your upbringing, Dave.
My upbringing,
how sad that
really
was.
Boring.
Yeah. How you were in and out of reform school. And
yeah, that one, yeah.
You've got a rap sheet as big as my elbow.
Yeah, is that true, do you think, about a lot of the punk bands, if that's the right word, from 1977 in Brisbane? I mean, I remember Robert saying in one interview somewhere that they really were reprobates. I mean, they really were
Oh, no, but see... I don't think that they were genuinely criminal. It was just part of that, the whole stance of the antisocial punk, the punk thing. It was get wrecked. It was take a lot of drugs. Behave in an antisocial way. We used to. I mean, Robert and I used to do everything that they did, but never announced it from the stage like they did. I mean, I'm not saying that we're bad boys, but I just prefer things. I prefer people to not be able to make a decision very quickly about you. And I know that, okay, you're working on Enigma. It's not got to do with that. It's what I'm interested in is presenting an alternative to things, and hopefully it's an alternative which is not too left of centre for people to absorb. It's what I was just reading this thing. By the French writer, the late Roland Barthes, and he was talking about, in literature, what he was interested in, and what he liked was difference, and he just used the word difference, and it just struck me that that's what I'm interested in some way, just presenting another way of looking at things.
Well, when yourself and Robert write songs, you write separately, do you?
Yeah.
So, there's no sort of correlation at all except with the music?
There is a correlation in that before we take new songs to the band, Robert and I will get together on acoustic guitars, go through the songs that we've got, try and remove superfluous bits or mould the song into some presentable shape to the band, because sometimes you'll take a song to the band and they'll go, "Ugh, that's horrible," you know, and that's so demeaning when we're two of the greatest songwriters in the world.
Yes, Grant. Why not? What about another LP, Grant? I mean, like Liberty Bell and the Black Diamond Express. I know it's not been out that long, but have you got plans for number 5? And will it be Beggar's Banquet? And
well, we do have plans for number 5. Hopefully it'll be Beggar's Banquet. I know that they want to take up the next option with us. We've got a lot of touring to do in between. After we finish in Ireland, we go back to London for about 12 days, and then we go back to Europe. This will be our 6th tour there, so I'm looking forward to going to see some friends there. Back to Holland and Germany and Austria, Switzerland, Italy, France, Belgium and Spain. And then we have July off, where our manager has allowed Robert and I the time to write songs, thinking that that's a holiday for us. I mean, managers are so crazy. And
you take time off to write, you don't write on the road?
It's impossible. I find it very hard because I'm too busy talking to people like you, going to coffee lounges like Conway's, going to garden parties at Trinity College.
Lunches.
I mean, come on. I mean, do you expect me to live 24 hours of my life?
A lot of people said to me
songs?
today, like, are the Go-Betweens going to do a proper gig in Ireland? Because, I mean, the thing is...
proper gig?
No, I don't mean a proper gig. I mean a proper tour sort of thing. A proper sort of, like, you know, you can go in and buy a ticket and go in to see a gig. I mean, for instance, now you're playing one more in Ireland, but that's a very exclusive gig, because unless you have you're a Trinity College student, you won't see it tomorrow night.
No, Dave, I understand that, and all I can say is I apologise to people who aren't able to come and see that gig, but it's got nothing to do with us. I mean, we would very much like to do a tour of Ireland, but it's to do with people who run clubs, promoters, things like that, who actually want us to come over, who are prepared to take the gamble on bringing such a hillbilly outfit as the Go-Betweens over to Ireland. I mean, I personally think it's a good investment, but... you know, it's up to them. I mean, we can't just get on a ferry and arrive in Dublin and say, OK, we're going to play Ireland. You can't do it that way. I mean, I do apologise, and I know the price of the ticket is very expensive, and I know it's, you know, closed membership, it's the whole class thing, but there's not much I can do about it. And there are other bands, Irish bands like That Petrol Emotion, I think, are playing the gig.
They are, yeah.
And I think maybe they should have more to answer for than foreigners like us.
Well, the terrible thing now is, Grant, that we've only got exactly 1 minute left in the programme, so that probably knocks out Kate Bush as well.
Oh, no, I can't knock out Kate Bush.
OK, I'll play Kate Bush.
Let's go into the next show. I mean, let's go into the next show. Yeah.
Jerry Ryan, where are you?
It's only a short song. It's a wonderful song by an English songwriter who I think is very underrated. She's had a lot of hits, and I think she's great.
Hold on, much more to the point. I'll tell you what I'll do, right?
OK, tell me.
I'll get Jerry Ryan to play it within the next 10 minutes on his programme. That's good enough, isn't it? Jerry, come here.
Jerry, here we go. Look, we're getting rid of live radio here.
He's slagging the Trinity Ball.
He was
I'm not
like...
saying how difficult it is. This is the next Trinity student talking here behind me.
For 10 years in a row.
Every night.
In the most elite section.
Thank you very
Jerry
much.
Ryan,
I know. I haven't been there for the last...
Jerry, will you play Kate Bush after this? I'll give you the album, right? I was supposed to say loads of things about Self-Aid and alternative Self-Aid and tomorrow night's programme.
Please go. Everyone should go to Self-Aid.
Everyone should go to
Yes, they should.
I agree with you,
They
Grant.
should.
Yeah, the only problem is there's no tickets left. There's no time left either, Grant.
The only thing is that the Go-Betweens aren't playing.
The Go-Betweens are not playing, that's quite true. Listen, we've got to go. So Peter Brown, myself, Dave Fanning, goodbye. Thank you very much, Grant, for coming in. Best of luck. Next time you're over from Australia, say hello to us.
Absolute
again.
pleasure. Goodbye.
Okay, Radio 2, 10 o'clock.